Okay, good afternoon. Welcome all to our 6th WMUG Tuesdays webinar. This time we have our own Bob Cornelissen, who is going to speak about monitoring in a hybrid world. But before we give the presentation to Bob, I have a few slides to share with you all. First of all, of course, we want to thank our sponsors. Without the sponsors, these kind of events are not possible. So thank you, sponsors, for that. Secondly, we are available on social media, of course. If you use Twitter, please use the hashtag WMUG_NL to make sure that you address us correctly. Further, we have some other channels available, especially the latest one, the YouTube channel. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, so because after a couple of registers, we can actually rename the channel to a more friendly name, because the name we have now is not easy to remember, so please do so. For next week, we have Jurgen Nielsen. Session will be published soon, so we expect the session to announce it hopefully this week. Highly recommended to attend that session as well. And for now, I want to give the presentation to Bob. Bob, our own Bob, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Please share your presentation and continue from here.
One moment. I will share my screen. All right. Should be light blue.
Yeah, we are live.
All right.
Good luck.
So thank you all for attending this this webinar, Monitoring in a Hybrid World. I've been asked a few times last year to present something like this, and I've moderated this session slightly for today's session. So let us start with this story. All right, so first of all, short agenda. So I will introduce myself and TOPQORE. Then we will start. We will talk about changing worlds, some Azure Monitor, some SCOM, and we have some extra stuff and some Q&A possibility at the end as well. So feel free to post your Q&A questions and we will address them later, or otherwise Kenneth will interrupt me if it's urgent. So let's move forward. Introduction to myself. Bob Cornelissen, been a Windows Server, System Center and Azure enthusiast. My nickname is SCOM Bob, so I'm guessing you can guess what my main work is. 8-time MVP for Microsoft for Cloud and Data Center Management. Before that, it was System Center, and there was exactly one day a SCOM MVP until they renamed that to System Center. Managing consultant at TOPQORE, also technical director. I am playing a lot of billiards if I can. Of course, since yesterday the lockdown was lifted for bars in the Netherlands, so I could play again. And I'm heavily involved in the House of Tales charity, which is a dog shelter in Thailand. And we also have a Dutch website. So please find us on Facebook. I'm sure you can find either me or the shelter quickly enough. So quick introduction into TOPQORE. And these pictures actually do look slightly alike, like the people. We are an international team of NT enthusiasts founded in the Netherlands, specializing in cloud and data center management and monitoring. We do a lot of SCOM work, upgrading, we have trainings, we provide health checks, implementations, and whatever else we can think of. We do blog. I am also a co-organizer or speaker at events, also like this one, as you see, WMUG NL is in here. And I'm also hosting webinars at TOPQORE.com. We also have a set of webinars every about 3 weeks. So let's move forward to the actual subject at hand. So monitoring in a hybrid world. We get this question a lot because we are used to monitoring with SCOM, on-prem data centers. Stuff is happening in the cloud, has been for a few years, of course. It's not new, but still for many people it is new to also consider how are we going to monitor this? Or we have a lot in SCOM and we only have 2 machines in Azure. How are we going to monitor it? Or maybe the other way around. So today I want to focus a little bit about the possibilities and the thought process behind it. And we can always go deeper into it if we have more time. So first of all, what are we used to? We are used to on-prem data centers, mostly. Almost all of them have some version of virtualization, be it Hyper-V or VMware or something else. Most are highly virtualized. However, full private clouds we see less often. That would be, for instance, if you have the system center stack, but then fully combined, implemented, everything automated. We see a lot of system center, but not the full stack always. So what is the best solution for this story? That'll be SCOM. SCOM. That's the short version of it. Why? Well, because it is a world-class data center monitoring product. There are many management packs from Microsoft, from vendors, from the community, and from third party. There's a big community out there. You know, there's TechNet, which is now becoming Microsoft Q&A. There is all kinds of third-party websites. There are blogs, webinars like this. There's a lot. There are also a lot of integrations and dashboards. So dashboarding tools either by Microsoft themselves or by third-party providers. So what is happening in the SCOM world? First of all, 2016 has UR9 as last version. We see a lot of movement from SCOM 2016 and from the semi-annual channel, the 1801 and 1807 to 2019. Keep in mind that 1801 and 1807 are no longer supported, so you will have to migrate those up to 2019 and then move on from there. We also see some migration from older versions up, 2012 usually, or 2012 R2, very occasionally 2007. We have currently SCOM 2019 update rollup 1 with a post hotfix as well. So if you're running 2019, run update rollup 1 and a post hotfix. There's the Azure Management Pack, which I will be talking about more a little bit later. And there's also SCOM 2019 update rollup 2 coming up soon. Not sure which month, but it should be soon in the summer. And it has also a lot of nice improvements there. And there's actually more going on, but it's not the time to talk about all of these. We will surely publish more about that soon. So, changing worlds. Of course, since a few years, I don't know, maybe 6 years or so, 6-7 years, we've been hearing a lot about the cloud and moving to the cloud, the Azure cloud. Of course, there are more providers like AWS and others. That is something which is becoming more and more mainstream as well, and not only mainstream, but also used more and more, not just a proof of concept. What we also see are things like containers. More and more containers coming in. Kubernetes is also getting much bigger. Also, if you're looking at the cloud platforms, even private clouds. And hybrid. So a few years ago, everything was certainly not data center, but only cloud, until they discovered that most customers were still in a data center. And now suddenly they changed a little bit to say, you know what, hybrid is important. And I think that is the truth of it, because there is a lot of cloud possibilities and advantages, and a lot also in the data center. And to become native cloud, that's a long process in some cases, unless you are starting new. So I really think that I believe in the hybrid cloud. Other words which we are coming across a lot lately are, of course, the cryptos, quantum computing, which is still, well, in a very young stage, artificial intelligence and machine learning, and also more and more possibilities to use these through your own services, basically, to provide services based on machine learning, for instance. So these are things coming up pretty quickly. So when we are talking about the cloud, then my first question would be, what cloud are you talking about? Because that's usually a confusion already. So to start with, you already might have a private cloud based maybe on System Center, maybe on other things. The full System Center stack cloud has been renamed to Azure Stack HCI, with the Azure Stack Hub being, let's say, the more boxed version of everything, which is basically an Azure in a box, which you can run on your on-prem data center. The HCI is more like a System Center deployment, completely automated. So you might have this in some way or another, which is a private cloud. And you might also have a third-party private cloud, meaning you might have a provider somewhere having a stack of machines for you, where they just manage and maintain for you, and you just connect your systems to it and your workstations to it, and you can use it. Or you might have a public cloud, which is running somewhere in Azure or AWS or some of the others, the big players out here in the world. There might be 5 or 6 very big players with Azure and AWS. I think they're the biggest ones after that. So it actually makes a difference to think about this question when you are thinking about how are we going to monitor it. Because again, you might have SCOM, and all of this System Center private cloud will be already connected to it. However, you might also have an Azure Stack as being an Azure Stack Hub, or it being hosted somewhere else, which then becomes more of a question, well, this is not a nearby cloud, this is a faraway cloud, which makes it different in how you are going to monitor this. So we have our bird here in the cloud, or, well, not currently in the cloud, but going. So another question when you're talking about what cloud are we talking about is, what kind of resources are you monitoring? What do you want to actually monitor, and in what format will they come? Is it just a state? Is it a performance counter? What kind of things do you need to know of these machines or services? Because if you're going to the cloud, the story is not anymore, we want to monitor a machine, because fully fledged cloud is not a machine anymore. Well, maybe in the backend, but you are not going to see it. So you're taking up a service, a database, a website, a queue, whatever, maybe only a script. So for example, are you monitoring a full VM in a network connected to your data center in the same domain? You know, means you are just stretching your data center out towards another location, which just happens to be in the cloud. You connect it over VPN, and you can talk with it all the same ways as that you did with any other machine on your network. Or are we talking about a mix of singular services? So more native cloud, just a website, just a database, or whatever. So monitoring the cloud with the cloud. So say you have your resources sitting in Azure, somewhere in the cloud. What can we use? In this case, we can use Azure Monitor. Azure Monitor is sitting as a cloud service provided by Microsoft. It's very easily accessible. And if you have any resources sitting there, you can just simply turn it on. And what can you get? Well, they have metrics, you have logs, there are security connections, There are application insights, which is more the web application monitoring side of things. You might also have separate resource monitors, for instance, for a website or a queue or a VM. I can show you that in a second. So what do we have so far in this story? So far, we've had an on-prem horse being monitored by SCOM, and we had an on-cloud bird monitored by Azure Monitor. So this is the start of things, right? So you're monitoring on-prem with on-prem and monitoring cloud with cloud. But of course, life isn't that easy. So we are going to expand a little bit more on this story. So first of all, Azure Monitor. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this first. There's documentation on the Microsoft Docs site. Actually, I think the Microsoft Docs site is pretty darn good. They have a lot of information and it's very extensive. There's also a book. There's a new version of the Inside Azure Management book just released a few days ago. Version 4, which is the May 2020 update. And you can get it through this link inside microsoftcloud.com/book. Just download it and get some ideas about the management side. So this is not only monitoring, this is also, for instance, backup and automation. So there's more to it than meets the eye. Let's see what my next page is. All right. So just to talk a little bit more about Azure Monitor and what's behind it and how you can see this story. So thinking about Azure Monitor, on the left-hand side, you have basically sources of data. So you have an application, an operating system, some Azure resources like a database or a website, or you might even have custom sources which you want to push in towards Azure Monitor. So Azure Monitor in the middle, you will see basically the data storage of Azure Monitor, which is log analytics. However, log analytics is actually built up out of two parts. One is metrics and the other one is logs. They changed that a few years back because they found that metrics is a different kind of data than logs is. And in order to optimize the billions and billions of records they are maintaining for all of their customers, it was a better idea to split up the data into two types of data. Anyway, this is all in the back end. You won't notice very much from it. So what do we do with this data? So first of all, going into the middle, there is the log analytics and the metric analytics. So this means that you can basically look at your data, make alerts, maybe also respond. That's something which is coming later. But this is the place where you can find out what your data is doing, what your logs are doing, or your metrics. You can query it, you can view it, you can do all kinds of things with it. This is very, very powerful if you know how to do this. You can also gain insights from applications. Like I said, there's application monitoring, application insights for instance, websites, where you can check if there are any errors, if there are any problems with the queries to your database backend coming from your website. There's also, for instance, here containers or a VM. So you might just be running a number of VMs, and these will also generate some data. I will show you this. Also, you can visualize this through dashboards, but maybe also through Power BI by pulling in the correct queries into Power BI and then dashboarding it whatever way you want to, because that's basically what that one is built for. But you can also, for instance, respond to it through alerts. So this might mean that if your VM reaches more than 90% CPU, you can either alert on it and send yourself an email, okay, this VM has a problem, or you can use it to auto-scale, for instance, a web form. If you have a standardized web form and your number of requests per minute or per second reaches a certain point, you can actually spin up additional web form machines to be able to reach more of your load. And of course, there's some integration as well. For instance, Logic Apps, which is the automation platform, and there are some export APIs. So, Azure Monitor demo. So let me move in the same screen to this one. Are we seeing a web page, Kenneth? Show a thumbs.
Yeah, we're fine.
All right. So I have a few tabs open here because I didn't want to scroll back and forth all the time. So this is part of Azure Monitor as well. So this is more of a classic view of some things I wanted to show you, because I can also show you some things which are not in SCOM, for instance. So this is coming back again to the same story later. SCOM is meant for monitoring some of your on-prem systems. So let's take SQL as an example, which I got here on the right-hand side. There's a SQL health check. So SCOM will actually tell you if something is up or down, or if something is really wrong, or something goes over a threshold. What the SQL health check, for instance, does is not included in any of the management packs. It actually checks for best practices. So this might not mean that something is actually up or down or bad, but it might mean that things can be better or improved. So this is what you have the assessments for. And I actually advise most customers to make very good use of assessments, because they are very cheap to run. So they cost almost no data. So there's a very low cost involved as well. So you can see that, for instance, this assessment is split up into 4 pieces: security, compliance, availability, performance, and the upgrade migration part. So if I go into one of these, let me just click this one. I need to click in the right place, it seems. So what we see is a list of recommendations, and they have a number here, which means how important is this. So the importance here, the prioritization, is built out of what we can see here. I can zoom it in a little bit. So the prioritization is high impact, very low probability, so it might not have any problems there. And the effort is moderate, so that's why they gave it a 5.2 rating. All right, so back again. So what you can see, there's a recommendation. There are some affected objects here and some suggested actions. So I apparently don't have a full database backup of some of these databases, which is correct because they are not that important to me at the moment. And also recovery model. Maybe there's a write error on a disk that I didn't know about. This is also a best practice or a possibility for improvement to place the data files and your log files on different disks to improve the performance. So this has nothing to do with the database being up or down, but it might help you improve your performance in some way. So this is not monitoring, but assessments. Another one I like very much is the system update assessment, because it basically tells you which machines have had their latest updates, etc., or which ones are still lacking some. So I guess this one is not that bad, because the yellow one is always one of these default things which are missing that I don't care about, but the red ones are very important to know. Anti-malware assessment is another one. Active Directory health check might be another one which is very interesting in this case. Right, so moving on to virtual machines. So within Azure Monitor, there's an overview here. So it says just simply monitor your application and infrastructure. And then on the left-hand side, we can scroll down and we can see different kinds of things we can look for. So for instance, we can look at the logs, we can look at metrics. We can also look at application health, or for instance, VMs. So I happen to have some VMs in here. I have 2 subscriptions. Those are the yellow ones here. And there are 2 machines. And I can immediately zoom in and go to one of these machines to check what we can see here. So this is actually a new feature of Azure Monitor, this virtual machines. It was in private preview and then public preview up until only a few weeks ago. And now it's public. So what we can see here is basically a form of the service map feature. So we have the machine in the middle. There are some clients connected to it. And we can see what ports are open. So there's port 80 open. This is a web server. So that might be correct. 80 and 443. And DNS. And on the right-hand side, we can actually see a little bit more. For instance, machine properties, IP addresses, names, but also some health. And if we go further, there are also alerts, log events, etc. But there's also a button here called Performance. And if we click it, then we get a number of built-in performance counters already shown on the screen. For instance, the logical disks with IOPS, with CPU, memory. Maybe if we scroll down a little bit, more IOPS, logical disk MBs used, latency, which is also usually something very important to look at. So we can immediately go from here and investigate what is being monitored. What we can also do is just go to a virtual machine in the virtual machine tab, just any virtual machine. And if we scroll down, we can just see already there's some data here as well. CPU, network, disk, and more disk. So this is purely on the VM tab. So this is really accessible and easy to reach. However, you are not going to have a screen open with 50 machines and then all of those 50 machines on separate screens. So that might be a mess, but you can see that there are counters on every object that you have already. Another thing I wanted to point out is Security Center, because we are talking about monitoring, right? And monitoring security has always been difficult, to be honest. In the past, through SCOM, we could also monitor some security things through the ACS module. Given a choice, this would be the first module in SCOM which I say, please don't use it. Please use it in the cloud version. Use Security Center, connect it up, and make much better use of its possibilities. Because there are so many possibilities here. We can see through all of the compute and app resources from actually in this case several workspaces. And you will have here a secure score, which is actually a nice way of moving yourself forward. So if you look at the secure score, we can see I have, in this case, 38 out of 56 points. And we can see the subscriptions do have a difference here. So if I go, for instance, to the, Azure sponsorship, let's see what I got here. Now we can see how can I quickly improve my points basically, right? So my percentage. And you can see the score increases here in the middle. So 11%, so 6 points if I go for remediate vulnerabilities. So what I can see here is one of my machines does not have the vulnerability assessment solution installed. And that one is actually the same one as this one. Enable built-in vulnerability assessment solution powered by Qualys. So this is actually also something relatively new. If you use this version, so the quick fix here, what it will actually do if you have a standard subscription is it will enable this solution and it doesn't cost anything. So there are also third-party add-ons which do the same and which are paid for, and this is then you can actually look at their screens and see what's going on, but also it's going to be connected to this one. Anyway, if you click quick fix, then you can go to that server and enable this, and then afterwards, then of course you might get the assessment entries coming in. So then this is fixed, but then you get the assessment entries, and that one might tell you, you know, you are not safe for this vulnerability or that one. And of course, you know, you have other things like manage access permissions. So there should be more than one owner assigned to your subscription. Well, in this case, it's not that important to me because it's a subscription I'm getting through my MVP status just for demo purposes. So it doesn't need more than one owner. But this is a quick way of, you know, changing this and fixing things to make things more compliant for the security. And then, of course, your secure score will be slowly raising. So please make sure and check the security center possibilities. You can do a whole session about it, especially why my server is being attacked every day by RDP brute force password guessing. Those are all the yellow ones here. And the red one is actually one where a machine found a potential wrong file. So maybe a virus, maybe not, but it cleaned it out, but it still stays red here. Anyway, so this is also very important to look at. And of course, you can reach all of these things from your standard portal. I'm going to portal.azure.com. You can go directly to your VMs or to your automation accounts to, for instance, arrange Windows patching. Very easy. Security Center, Monitor. So if you click on Monitor, then immediately you reach up to the place where I was before in the beginning. So let's jump back into the presentation. That was Azure Monitor. So now we're going to mix up some things. So we were just monitoring cloud resources with the cloud. However, we might also have on-premise machines sitting somewhere on the data center. Can we actually monitor those with the cloud? So the answer is yes, we can. We can use Azure Monitor for that. In this case, it still will have log analytics, again, the metrics, assessments, and some custom solutions. So some of the ones in the dashboard which you looked at first were actually all connected to my on-prem demo environment, some of the machines sitting there. So you can see it really doesn't care. It uses the Microsoft Monitoring Agent, which is basically the same as the SCOM agent. And if you want to, if you have an on-prem SCOM, you can actually connect these up through the SCOM console up to your Azure Monitor workspace, and then move forward from there, from the Azure Monitor side to configure what you want to monitor, which assessments you want, etc. And of course, again, you have here Azure Security Center, which you can link up as well. So it is very much possible to monitor your on-prem resources with the cloud, however, in a cloud way. So in the way you are not used to with SCOM, but in another method, by analyzing metrics, by defining everything yourself. Now, can we also go the other direction? So let's say we have a SCOM sitting on premise, or maybe it's even sitting in the cloud. That's also possible in a private network usually. Can we monitor cloud-based resources? Well, yes, you can. So these might be cloud-based VMs, which you did a lift and shift on. You picked up a few VMs, you placed them in inside of Azure, just so they are running on another machine, basically. But they are still Windows machines, maybe sitting in your domain, connected to your backend. So you can just install the agent on them and connect them back up to your SCOM. So what if they are Azure resources? So the VM is actually also a resource on the backend. So let's looking at the virtualization platform, basically. But you might also have websites or other things sitting there. We can actually use the Azure Management Pack to monitor those. So there's a download link here. For Office 365, there is an Office 365 Management Pack from Microsoft. Download link is here. However, I think it needs some work. I think it needs a lot of work, to be honest. But you can also use a third-party solution like the ones from NICE. They have an active 365 management pack, which can monitor a little bit more on the Office 365 side. Because basically things like Office 365, they are software as a service. So what do you want to measure there? You don't care about the CPU of a machine. You only care about, your access being there, so access to that backend service. And if your email is still there, and all of the rest doesn't matter anymore, because that's what the software as a service provider, in this case Microsoft, is just taking care of for you. So what you are used to wanting to know about your Exchange server does not apply anymore for an Office 365 site. If you are running an Azure Stack, let's say the one which is provided by standardized systems, there's an Azure Stack management pack as well. I have not played with it myself, but I know somebody who did, because he had an Azure Stack and I don't have one. So yeah, that's also very nice, and you can use that. So these are ways of monitoring cloud resources from SCOM by using either management packs or connectors. So let's demo that. All right, let me jump into SCOM. Oh, isn't that beautiful? All right, so this is the Azure Management Pack. So this is the folder, and all of this below belongs to that management pack. So what we can see here in the middle is a number of resources, and I will show you how I configured this in a second, because I just found out this morning that the config of one of the two possibilities is gone. So now we are only seeing everything belonging to one of the paths. So I can see here there's a virtual machine, and I'm monitoring its status. Of course, this is the service state, so this means, is this service available? Is this VM, Azure VM, available to me? And that is a green in this case. So it doesn't necessarily measure more, but that is all having to do with the configuration. So if you change the configuration, you will see other things like performance counters coming in, or maybe alerts coming in over thresholds. So if I click here on administration, we see here some management packs. Ooh, I can't type anymore. All right, so here we see the Azure management pack. It's 1.8.0.2. It's the latest version. There's been a change, I think last April, but I think that's just publishing this version again. So what I did when I was going to configure the settings for it, which I will show in a second, I just created two new management packs here at the bottom. One is for my pay-as-you-go subscription, and the other one is for the Microsoft sponsorship subscription, because I have two. And let's go into authoring. So in authoring, you have management pack templates, Microsoft Azure Monitoring, which gets added by the management pack. And in this case, I just created these two entries, both in their own management pack. So let me first open up the first one. All right. I hope you can all see this. If it's hard and difficult to see, then just let me know. I can try and use Zoom it. But there are basically two ways of running this wizard, this setup wizard. Of course, I already did it. I'm now opening it. You can either go by resource group monitoring or by service monitoring. So in this case, I chose resource groups. So I made a connection. You need to log in, refresh. And then I can select which resource groups I want to monitor something from. In this case, because it's a small one, I just select all, because that's easier. And now looking at which service types are running in these, I can actually open these up. And for instance, here over here, I see in this resource group, I can see there is a virtual machine in here. So one VM. So you can select whatever you want to monitor here. And next, there is an exclude list. So for instance, if I have virtual machines here, which I do not want to monitor, I can put them in here. For instance, anything with test in the name of the VM, for instance, or anything with test in the name of a disk or an automation account. You can just put them in here in the exclude filter and they will be left out. The next thing you need to think about is the metrics. So looking at virtual machines, if I open it up, we can see that I just collected only a few checkboxes here. So I want to collect percentage CPU. However, I am not alerting on it, but I can. So I can click here, alert if we are greater than 90% CPU. Right, and then I can apply this and move on to another one. So this is a way of not only collecting, which is the middle column, but also making some of the alerts by using the thresholds on your metrics. And then at the end, you will see a summary of whatever you are applying. You click OK, and you are done. Let me just ignore this for now. So going at it through another way is by using the services types. So I will go in here, see service types, and as you see, my config here is gone. That's because I made some changes here and basically lost this config. So again, I can say I want to monitor VMs. Maybe I want to monitor the key vaults, which I have, maybe a virtual network, and well, let's just ignore the rest. Exclude list. Doesn't matter. They're all the same anyway. And then for virtual machines, again, I can select something. So let's just collect CPU. Doesn't matter what the rest is at this moment. I can set thresholds again or not and click OK and wait for it to save the config. So with
Hi, Bob.
Yeah?
Sorry to interrupt you. We have a question. The question is whether or not the SCOM is a dedicated machine on the on-premise virtual networks in order to use the management pack.
It doesn't need to be dedicated, so it does not matter. You can use your existing SCOM to connect it up to either using this Azure Management Pack or to just connect it up into the cloud and to the Azure Monitor side to become hybrid, basically.
Okay, thanks.
So you don't need a separate one.
Great.
Right, so that's this story. I can show you quickly where the other part is. So Azure Log Analytics is sitting over here. If you're running another version of SCOM, you might see other wording here, maybe still OMS, although we are not supposed to use that word anymore since the last few years. But if you go in here, you will say go to connection, and then you can say, okay, I want to, in this case, it's already done, but I want to connect to Log Analytics in this case. Or, well, here it still says OMS. That's funny. What you do is you connect to it using your own account, which has admin rights in your workspace. And then it will generate a key on the backend and use that one to connect. So it doesn't, you only need to use your own password only once. You don't need to be afraid that it will keep using your account and password forever. It just creates its own key and then it's connected up. And then you can go to manage computers and just select any computer which you want to talk to, in this case, the Azure Monitor side. So I just connected only a few of the machines up, and those will then talk to Azure Monitor and say, okay, what do you want us to do? And then you will see a lot of management packs, for instance, well, the first 2/3 of the screen up until here, that's all coming from Advisor. So Advisor is basically the oldest code name for this Azure Monitor side, and they are stuck a little bit with the name because they started using it in the beginning, and because of all of the GUIDs pointing to the same GUIDs, they needed to keep the name. So anything Advisor here is connected to it. So we talked about SQL, we talked about update assessment, health assessment, anti-malware assessment, and some other things, let's say monitoring. Those are usually performance counters like CPU, memory, whatever I wanted to do. And it's just collecting all of these together. Right, so from SCOM, you can monitor cloud resources. Let's move back to the presentation. All right. So what do we have so far? Well, the vertical lines we already have, and now we also have some crosshairs. So we can monitor the cloud from SCOM or use the cloud to monitor on-prem. In this screen, it's still a choice what you are going to do. However, the world does not need to be that, that simple, that black and white. You don't need to use only one. You can actually make the best of both and combine things. So in my view, the future is hybrid. I see many companies in the coming years, they will have resources both on-prem and in the cloud, and very often they are connected as well. So again, you don't see your on-prem data center and your cloud virtual data center, let's say, as two different entities. They will be connecting up. So some examples, if you can have Office 365, but still use your Active Directory accounts, if you're on-prem. You might have a number of VMs living in Azure, but still connected back into your on-prem data center. So basically, it's just another location, right? However, you might also have, let's say, more cloudy web resources, which is just a web app, for instance, a WordPress or whatever. And it might actually connect back up into a backend, let's say a database, which is living in your data center. So in that case, you are actually creating pure hybrid forms of your services. So where your services are living, which also means that your monitoring side might also be mixed. So you might have on-prem and cloud, and you can combine these things together. As you also just saw, I can make a connection as well between SCOM and Azure Monitor to just make management easier in my case. So what do we get is a combination of everything put together. And in this case, I just copied some cheesy picture of a Pegasus from somewhere, which is a kid's toy, but it looked great. And it's a nice combination between on-prem and cloud in order to combine things to make things better. And those are just the services. And of course, you can do exactly the same thing with your monitoring platform sitting at the bottom of the screen. You can use each for each, and you can combine the things to make a better together story. So this is basically my my point at the end of the story. Just some extra information. As TOPQORE, we also do some webinars. This is some which is upcoming. Keep in mind, this is not WMUG. Kenneth will talk about that in a second. So there will be an upgrade primer at the SCOMathon. If you're interested in SCOM, please come to the SCOMathon. I think it's like 14 or 16 hours in one day being combined. We will have one which is talking about SCOM updating from one version to another. SCOM reporting, we will have a blog post series about it because we get asked a lot about that as well. We will do something together with NICE, and we will talk about Azure Security Center basics from the ground up. And then maybe at some point we can get another expert to talk about more of Azure Security Center later. Watch our blog, follow us, etc. All right, so some Q&A. These are some FAQ items I just prepared, so not sure if anything is within time. I don't know what the current time is, if we have any time left. But
we still have time available, Bob, so
feel free to get your Q&A on. I don't know where it is anymore.
okay, so Bob, we have a slight delay, so let's wait for some questions to pop in. We have an outstanding question though, which says, and I'm going to repeat the question as is, SCOM is a tool created before Azure Stack. Can you tell us a little bit more about how it's positioned? So how do we, is there monitoring in Azure Stack? Can we do monitoring of Azure Stack with SCOM?
Yeah. So Azure Stack is basically built as a preset. So looking at Azure, well, the problem is the terminology, because they changed, let's say, the System Center private cloud stack towards Azure Stack HCI. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. So the fully System Center cloud is basically has its own SCOM. So you can monitor that, you can act with it. If when looking at the Azure Stack as a box, let's say, with a few servers in it and some network and etc., it basically looks like Azure, like an Azure portal. You can order a VM or you can order something else. Any of the services available through that Azure Stack that you can monitor using your on-prem SCOM by loading up that management pack and talking to it through that way. So this is how you can monitor that.
Okay, oh, sounds good. Maybe a question I do have myself. When you look at SCOM, you start implementing a management pack, and that management pack does its magic. That's the way I always tell it, because it discovers where it needs to start monitoring and starts working on itself. When you look at actually the Azure Monitor part, it's actually the other way around. You connect your sources and you really need to specifically define what you want to monitor. Do you have any idea why that change of behavior was introduced?
Well, it is because basically SCOM can scale pretty big, especially if you need to have a big company, for instance, and you can even have multiple SCOMs and they all work together. You can set that up. However, it does not scale to cloud size. So that's very simple, right? So you cannot have something spanning the globe and all of the customers in it. So it's not built for multi-tenancy. It's also not meant for these kind of scale. So what you can do in this case with the Azure Monitor, what it was first doing is first collect anything you are interested in. So these might be performance metrics, these might be your IaaS log files, which are not just collected in SCOM that easily. Right? You can monitor them, but it's not like a collection of everything. So if you collect all of these log files, then later on you might want to think about, okay, what do we actually want to know from these data sources? So you're actually looking for specific things, and in my experience, in this case, in most cases, you still need to create something yourself. So you can need to create some queries in KQL to sift through these data sources, be it either a log or a metric, and find what you are looking for, and then think about what you want to do with it. You want to alert with it, or you want to, take an action or an automation about it. So what we've seen happening is that, SCOM has so many management packs. It feels sometimes that it monitors everything, and you get alerts about everything. And sometimes it overwhelms you if you don't tune it down very much. On the other hand, from the cloud side, they needed to take the other approach to say, okay, we can collect because our data lake is infinitely big. You can just throw it at us. We can index everything, and then you can query for what you want to. So for them, it was just easy, collect everything, and then you query, you find out what you want. And some companies have been making good progress into making some dashboards or making some custom services for their customers. So dashboards maybe or other things and useful queries. But yeah, it is a learning curve and you need to really think about what you want. So in this case, you might not get any alert and you need to start defining what you want alerts on. And you're never going to reach whatever, the SCOM management pack was telling you, which is, sometimes into the thousands of rules and monitors, sometimes 10,000 or more, usually. So in this case, you need to think about what is the most important, and then start acting and querying upon those. And then maybe in this case, you might be missing some less important things, which SCOM actually does pick up. So this is always the big difference, I guess. And
Okay.
state, health state.
Yeah.
It's something they are building now.
Luckily.
Yeah.
Another question is, we've seen the fact that the Azure Monitor part is based on log analytics. Do you have any recommendations on solutions to use on top of that? Do you have some favorites which you always implement?
Not that many actually. There are some things which are basically meant for the operating system. There are a few different versions of it. For instance, I know that Cameron made some, Stanislav created some, either only for Windows or for Windows and Linux combined, picking up some major counters to collect and then display. So they kind of made a solution in there. And anything else is basically building it up from the ground up. So just thinking about what you might want in a dashboard and then placing that in. But that is a different process to follow. Yeah, and you really need to think in a different way from your SCOM thinking days, because it is not the same and it's not meant to be the same either. So for instance, the middle question here, can we compare SCOM and Azure Monitor? Well, actually, no. It's a totally different system. You might think it does the same because it collects stuff and it, monitors stuff and it displays stuff, but it's all done in a completely different way. So your way of thinking needs to change if you are doing things from another side.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, thanks. Well, no new questions popped up, and I'm out of questions as well. So, okay. Well, I do have other questions, but not related to this webinar.
I have one more thing I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Related to the question at the top of the screen. I know this is always something which makes some of my colleagues in the community smile, but SCOM is definitely not dead, just like SCCM, as it turns out. And it actually is continued development. There are update rollups coming, and the next version of Windows, which will come in sometime, I don't know when, 2000 something year, right? And there also will be a new SCOM at that point. And from there is again, it's a long-term servicing branch, so it's a 5 + 5 year support. So in a few years, there will be 10 more years support for that version at least. So we are still looking way into the future. So make use of both options if it fits your structure, your company structure.
Yeah, in the case of SCCM, actually, the interesting remark from Microsoft was we will keep the product as long as you need it. And I think we can say the same for SCOM. So as long as companies still need the requirements which SCOM delivers, the product will most probably still be around, which is actually quite good. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, for me, that ends this webinar. We will have a recording of this webinar available, which we will upload to our YouTube channel. I have some last slides to share with the audience, so
Okay.
I will do that.
Share it.
Let's hope it's working. Okay, here we go.
Yes.
So, okay. Well, to finish up, once again, thanks to our sponsors. Without the sponsors, we are not able to organize these kind of meetings, especially the meetings we have on premises, which unfortunately is not possible at the moment. But with the help of the sponsors, we are able to fly in people from outside of the Netherlands and to speak for us. So that's very much appreciated. Again, for next week, we have Jürgen Nielsen, who's going to actually speak on a topic most probably related to something with config manager or endpoint manager, as we call it nowadays. Keep a look at our website, and we, once the session details are known, we will send out a mailing as well, giving you all the details. And last but not least, if you could be so kind to leave feedback and let us know what you think about this session, come with some suggestions for next sessions, etc. We now have a friendly URL available, thanks to Peter. So please visit the URL, and I think Peter will also copy and paste the URL in the meeting Q&A so that you can click on it from there. That's it for now. So thank you for attending our meeting. Thank you, Bob. We really appreciate it, you taking time for us. And we hope to see you next week.
All right. Thank you very much.